All right, ladies and gentlemen, can we take the seats, please, and get started with the second part of the program? Thank you very much. Chris Murphy is an incredible talent, and it's an incredible journey that we're on. I think it's going to take a long time to get anything done, whether it's a Disclose Act, whether it's a constitutional amendment, whether it's whatever happens, Shareholder Protection Act, whatever the route is. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. It's going to require a lot of work on the ground by us, by all the people in this room and all the people that we can reach out to. And that's what the second part of this program is today. And I'd like to bring up Julie Balaga, who's going to introduce our next speaker. And he's going to speak. Then we're going to have a breakout session where we're actually going to talk amongst ourselves about things we can do and then come back together. So this is a work session today, not just a sit and listen session. And but first of all, I think everybody knows Julie Balaga, the woman who knows and won't have any introduction.
First of all, the Congressman was terrific in alerting you to what you already knew. There isn't anybody in this audience who doesn't know how serious is the campaign finance condition of this country. And let me tell you, it isn't just since this recent Supreme Court decision. It goes way back to my days in the legislature when we were very concerned about it. And we started dealing with the issue here in Connecticut, and in 2008 we did finally pass a campaign finance law. But even before then, I was alerted to the fact that the federal government, there was an organization that was trying very hard to deal with these issues, and it was called American Campaign Finance Reform. And I agreed to go on that board because I felt there was so much at stake here that if we didn't get our arms around campaign finance reform, we were going to be in deep trouble. Who knew it would end up being as bad as it is? But in those days, I just said, damn it, we've got to start thinking about this stuff. So what do you want to take out of here today? You want to figure out what you can actually do. Enough talk. We all know how serious this is. There is no disagreement with how serious this is. And from my vantage point, there is one organization that has a leg up, and that's why I'm so thrilled that Rob is here. Because I told John to call him, because you need to know that there are private sector groups that care passionately and that are working hard to make a difference. Now, Rob is I've got to get you touched. He's the National Field Director for America's. I never like to mistake somebody's title. But he has some really good credentials. He comes out of the private sector where he worked for a host of nonprofit organizations. And working in the nonprofit world is different to working in Congress or working in the state senate or the state house. You really have to have a broad base of support. You need Republicans and Democrats, folks. You need Republicans. And in fact, the organization that Rob is going to tell you about, and I'm not going to talk long, but the reason it really appealed to me was that there were four people who put their names on the line. And those four guys, was all men, I'm sorry to say.
That can change.
It should change. It should change. Those four guys were, why don't I have my papers? Who are they?
I can tell you.
Thank you. It was
Bill Bradley.
Bill Bradley, Democrat.
Bob Kerrey.
Bob Kerrey, Democrat.
Warren Rudman.
Warren Rudman, Republican.
And Alan Simpson.
And Alan Simpson, and a man with a great sense of humor. Republican. Those four guys, very early on, said, we've got to move forward. And it can't just be rhetoric, it's got to be action. And they hired Rob. And he is here to work with you and walk you through what's going on and where you can actually make a difference and how you can put your anger into action. Because if we don't act as a group, and all of us, and don't just rule out all Republicans, I speak from what I know, that you can, in fact, build coalitions. Because if you don't build coalitions, you never, ever win in the final analysis. So I am proud to introduce, thank you,
Thank you.
I think we're very lucky that Rod and his wife would take the day off and come and talk to us about what we really can do. And I'm going to go sit in the back of the room. But, guys, this is the hope for the future. Do something constructive.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, so I've been with Americans for Campaign Reform for about 5 years. We're based in Concord, New Hampshire. Our founder is a Granite Stater, and that's why we are based in Concord. And we are very happy that our Senator Warren Rudman has come to support this strongly. He didn't originally. He was, when he was in the Senate, he wasn't particularly warm to this idea, but I think his experience in the Senate and as an elected official over time led him to be supportive of public funding of elections. So as Julie said, we have these 4 folks who are our national co-chairs, and we are very focused on the federal picture. We are a singularly minded organization. It is our sole purpose to advocate for public funding of elections on the federal level. That also includes presidential public funding. I'll touch on that in a minute. But we do think that it's very important for a variety of reasons to get public funding for Congress on the books. I think that will change our political culture, as Chris Murphy was mentioning a great deal. I wanted to say a couple things about Citizens United. You know, it was a horrible decision in terms of its jurisprudence, but in some ways, actually in many ways, it's been a messaging benefit in terms of bringing these issues to the fore. As much as we are struggling with the aftermath of it all, I firmly believe that this election cycle is going to sensitize people as never before to the problems that all this money sloshing around in our political system that is undocumented is causing. And I really think that when we get past this election into the 2013-2017 timeframe, we really do think that there is an opportunity to make some progress. And it is in part to the difficulties that we're having now. So at least it has brought some focus on the need. Chris was talking about the Disclose Act. I have to be forthright. Americans for Campaign Reform did not support the Disclose Act as it came forward last year by Senator Schumer and Congressman Van Hollen. And the reason is because it had a lot of extraneous, in our view, aspects to it that weren't focused on transparency, disclosure. And there were some differences between how corporations were treated, how unions were treated, and how 527 groups or other nonprofit groups that involved themselves in electioneering were treated. And for those reasons, and also you may have heard as that legislation is wending its way through the process, there were many exemptions that were granted to national organizations that had significant membership, like the NRA, AARP, Sierra Club, so forth. It didn't matter, left or right, center, you know, Sierra Club, NRA, exempt from these provisions. And that's yet another reason why we didn't feel comfortable supporting it. That's a very slippery slope. What we do support and what we are working with, and will continue to do so, with members of Congress, and particularly starting on the Republican side of the aisle, is a very simple, straightforward disclosure bill that treats all entities the same, corporations, unions, any groups that are involving themselves in electioneering aspects. And we actually have worked with the Campaign Legal Center and Trevor Potter, who some of you might know as Stephen Colbert's lawyer. And also Trevor, as you again might know, was the legal counsel for John McCain's presidential campaigns in 2000 and 2008. He's a strong supporter of what we're doing and what has been talked about here. But from a different perspective and from a realization that we need to build bipartisan support to get this done. We had thought that we were making some progress with some Republican members of the House, but then the leadership of the House sort of got wind of what was going on here, and they really put the kibosh on these efforts. I think largely because they don't want any unanticipated wrinkles or forces coming into an election that they think they may have figured out in some ways. So we have put those efforts on the side a little bit. We have a good bill, we think. We're going to take another run at it in January after the election. But I do think we can build some support and get some things done on it. So I wanted, in fairness, wanted to give our views about Citizens United and transparency and disclosure. There is a solution. It just needs to be very fair to all concerned. Also, I think that something that is not stated about Citizens United that makes it even more insidious is that it's not even the amount of money that's spent or that are injected into political campaigns by all of these different entities. It is the implication, it is the threat of I'm going to drop $1 million or $3 million or $5 million on your head, Mr. Congressman, Ms. Congressman, if you don't do X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to spend the money. The threat of it can be enough. And I think that is an extremely corrosive aspect of where we find ourselves today. But it doesn't get talked about that much. But I think when you think about it, it's pretty obvious in our political system that is occurring. Although transparency and disclosure is important and forms a fundamental aspect of our political system and our values and our democracy, I echo Congressman Murphy very strongly that it is not enough. We need public funding of elections for Congress, and we need to repair the public funding of election system for the presidency. As far as public funding for the presidency, that system worked very, very well for 20 years, from 1976 to 1996. And then it really began to fray and is now not used at all. And the large reason for that is that it has not kept pace with the demands of modern presidential campaigns. There's no indexing of costs in that system, so that now you find yourselves in a situation as a presidential candidate that there's just simply not enough money in that system on an individual basis to run a modern presidential campaign. And it comes, that comes in part from our philosophy as a national organization that notwithstanding all the undocumented money and the money that is being spent by so few in huge amounts, we don't necessarily start from a supposition that there is a broad brush problem with all money in politics. We don't. Our view is that it's coming from the wrong places, that it is funded by the wrong forces, wealthy corporations, wealthy individuals too much, special interests that then hold sway over legislative decisions. So what we want to see is a public funding of election system that moves from a privately funded system that is so narrowly based to a much more broad-based system, small donor system that involves the American people, involves people in the districts in which the folks that represent them, that they can have relationships with and some connection with and a stake in. And we really feel that we can do that through small donor fundraising, much the way that New York City does it. What we propose on a national level, what Congressman Murphy has signed on to as a sponsor of the Fair Elections Now Act, is a system that is based on a match. So when you're running for Congress in this district, I can't give you any more than $100 or perhaps $200. That still in our mind very much qualifies as a small donation. You could give anywhere from $5 to $200, let's say. Those contributions anywhere along that continuum would be matched with an aggressive match, 5 to 1, 6 to 1, so that my contribution to you is significant and can be used to run your campaign. And when you do that, there's a couple things that occur. You strongly reward candidates that work hard, because the more that you go out and prove support among your constituents in your district, the more strongly you are rewarded for it. And I think that's a value as a electoral system that we really ought to respect and encourage. So people to really get in there, in their communities, and leverage those funds, those small donations, so that we can move our system more in that direction. For Congress, you would need to collect 1,500 of those kinds of donations. And when you start doing the math, you realize that as you leverage these dollars, you give candidates significant amounts of money, an adequate amount of money to run campaigns. Because it makes no sense if you're going to propose a public funding of election system that you don't provide adequate resources for candidates, particularly candidates that are first-time candidates or running against incumbents or unknown people, to get their message out. That's very critical to the success of the program. The Fair Elections Now Act in the last Congress got quite a lot of support, almost 200 sponsors. We had an election in between that has changed the character of Congress, obviously. The bill was introduced by Congressman Larson and Senator Durbin. There are a small group of Republicans in the House that support the bill. Senator Durbin has been unable thus far to get much Republican support in the Senate. But again, our view of how we can operate and how we can build on this is to try to continue to broaden the support for these ideas and these concepts, and particularly among Republicans. I've been spending most of my time over the last year on the Hill talking with Republican staff members, and there are people on that side of the aisle who care about these issues. But it's very difficult in this present political environment for them within their party to express that. I think we're in a sense of our politics right now, which is extremely dangerous and unfortunate, that no matter what party you are a member of, you sincerely reaching across the aisle to try to solve something, you get punished. And we have to get beyond that. And maybe it's going to take a real crisis to get beyond that. I don't know, but it is very corrosive to solving anything. Because obviously we have a Congress right now that can't grapple with much of any issue. We have very large issues facing us. No matter how we got here, we have to solve them. And our situation that we are in now, with all this money sloshing around, only makes that worse, makes that less likely to happen. There are other issues, redistricting, term limits. Some people think that's a good idea that has been tried in some places. My own view is if we had a very robust system of public funding of elections that expands speech, that's the other aspect. This approach is completely constitutional. It must be voluntary, but it actually expands speech. It respects our First Amendment. If you had that kind of system where more competition was created on a consistent basis, I don't think we'd need term limits. I think that impulse would recede. Because right now, we are facing a situation where who runs for Congress? Who can ever dream of running for Congress? People that are wealthy, people that have immediate connections to wealth. I met a political consultant in Chicago last year who told me that if you, he had advised candidates that if you're going to be running in suburban Chicago for Congress, you best be able to collect $1,000 from 400 people within the first 60 to 90 days, or just forget it. Forget about it. So what does that do to our talent pool? Because you can look at our elections as a search system. You know, we only have 537 people, the Congress and the President and the Vice President, who are all elected by us to grapple with the issues that are so important to our country and to represent us. So our elections are, in essence, our search system. And because we are operating in this rather bizarre fashion of how we construct our electoral system and who can run, we are restricting it to a very, very finite group of people. And look at all the talent. Look at all the talent in this room or any other room of gathering of people. But who in this room could dream of running for Congress under our present circumstances and think that they could build community support and succeed. It's very, very difficult. And we need to change that. We need to change it for the good of our country and for our future. So we are fighting hard to build broad-based support. There are groups, national business groups like Committee for Economic Development that have a good amount of CEOs around the country that are increasingly caring about this issue. Because the business community and corporate community, I think, over this period of time, are realizing that they have a responsibility in terms of the progress of our nation, and they're tired of being shaken down, many of them that we talk to. It's not just another cost center in terms of campaign finance reform or contributions. It's getting very much out of hand for a lot of those folks because it is increasing in terms of the frequency of asks and the amount of asks. And so I think we are hurtling towards something that is unsustainable, and I think in short order people are going to be focused on how can we make a difference. So that's what we're about, trying to build broad-based support and in this for the long haul, because it is a long-term project. But we are ultimately hopeful that we can get there. So.
Can you talk about grassroots efforts in other places?
Sure. I was going to talk about New York. And New York is very important. And it's one of the things I wanted to get your views on, being so close to New York State. And I'm sure that many of you have family, friends, and business associates in New York State. But it's a very critical situation and an opportunity right now. You may know that earlier last month, Governor Cuomo, in his State of the State address, strongly endorsed public funding of elections as a form of campaign finance reform, and he said, let's get it done this year. We are working with Common Cause New York and a lot of other groups in the city and the state, including the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU. It's leading an effort to pull together business support across the state and also some political support in terms of former members of Congress. But New York is really an opportunity because if Governor Cuomo and allies in the legislature, including some Republicans, can get this done for the state, it would be hugely significant nationally. We're not in a situation where we're going to make a lot of progress nationally this election year. Again, there may be an opportunity starting next year. But for now, if we can get New York on the books in terms of public funding, and what the model they're looking at is based on New York City's and sort of a match model in which I described, it would be hugely significant, not only an improvement for the people of New York, which historically has had a lot of problems in terms of process and corruption, but it would be a very strong signal nationally. It would help the national effort to have the second largest state in the nation have a public funding system. So I urge you, if you know people in New York State, if you know legislators in New York, particularly Republicans, particularly Republican state senators anywhere in the state, that can be very helpful. I will also say that it's critically important to protect and strengthen the public funding of election systems on the state levels that exist now, here in Connecticut, in Maine, and in Arizona. All of these states, to various degrees, have been adjusting their rules and policies based on court decisions. I think that's been largely successful, but opponents of public funding have seized on those opportunities as they see them to try to weaken public funding. Those have to be resisted and overcome at all costs, because as advocates, those of us who believe in public funding for the national level, we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where opponents can point to problems of either administration or practice in the states that have full public funding as an excuse to undermine what we're trying to do nationally. And that can happen. So it's very important. So anything that you can do here in the state of Connecticut to bolster that system, strengthen that system. I know that it's recent decisions in Hartford have created a situation where the enforcement is not as strong as it can be, as I understand it. But we need to fight against that and try to get full funding for the program and good administration for it as well. You know, in many ways, this state in New England, really, in many parts of New England, there are many people that are converted to this aspect of public funding of elections. Certainly this congressional delegation here in Connecticut is very strong and has been, and it's important to keep it that way. But you know, we need to continue to beat the drum on this and to be able to point to success. The great thing about these states, and of course Connecticut was the first state in which a full-blown public funding system was passed through a legislature, because Maine and Arizona were accomplished via referendum. That's obviously the way that it's going to happen in Congress. That's the way that it's going to happen in New York State. So any experience and advice that people here have in Connecticut about how to get things through a standing legislature, of course, is very welcome to the national level. But that's some things that you can do here.